Winter is beautiful in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Miles away from the nearest civilization, only the silent sound of snow gently falling can be heard. Incredibly, the silence is broken by the sound of a distant whistle. No roads or railroad tracks are anywhere nearby, and yet we see a plume of smoke over the tops of the trees. What is it? A locomotive without rails? It seems like a snowmobile, bulldozer tracks with a steerable sled, but steam-powered. This is the Lombard Log Hauler, an invention that was patented by Alvin Lombard of Waterville, Maine in 1901. Before the Lombard was invented, the logging industry was limited to areas near rivers where the logs could be floated out of the deep woods to sawmills nearby.
Having talked with the old-timers that had done the logging in the hills here up in the White Mountains, I had learned that Mr. Lombard of Waterville, Maine had built 83 such machines, and all were dormant in 1938 when I bought my 2395 Elgin bicycle from Sears Roebuck and climbed aboard my bike to go 12 miles south on my first safari away from home to see a log hauler that had worked down in Campton. And money is an easy thing today. There's plenty of it. We think these are hard times here in 92, but these are easy times. A little bit of money would have gone a long ways back then, but none of us had money. But I did see a number of machines, and 5 of them were absolutely given to me outright if I would go into the woods and bring them out. One was by the Parker Young Company right here in Lincoln, and this is one of 2 that was in a building side by side. I had been told to pick for this one that had a good crankshaft. The only 2 that were out in civilization was the one up at Clayton Lake that belonged to K.C. Irving, who today is the Irving Gasoline Company. The other machine belonged to Lou Burris, and Lou used to take it out on the main street of Caribou, Maine during the February carnival period and run her up and down the street.
The Lombard Log Hauler was the first machine to feature the endlessly turning tracks used on construction equipment and army tanks ever since.
It is bewildering to me that on a first try, Lombard produced a crawler system that is fundamentally identical to this day. It is quite friction-free. A beautiful job on a first try, and the system has not been defied to this day. Here we have the sprocket, and we're driving from the rear, as all bulldozers do today. Lombard knew that, to drive from the rear to keep the tight pads on the bottom, whereas if he drove at the other end, he would be putting loose pads in, and it would be a poor ride.
In 1910, Alvin Lombard notified the Young Caterpillar Tractor Company that their products infringed upon his patent. Although Caterpillar agreed that Lombard was owed royalty money for his invention, it is believed that he never received a penny, despite the incredibly wide use of his rolling track concept. Before the Lombard Log Hauler, teams of horses and oxen were used to drag logs out of the forest to the rivers and mills.
He's way behind us now. All right.
Ed Clark and his resourceful family and co-workers rescued their log hauler from the woods in Maine in order to restore it.
To have a Lombard, the biggest piece you need, of course, is the boiler. And we have heard of a boiler in Upper Maine. So we quickly made a toboggan out of sheet metal, about a ½ inch thick, to go up and get this boiler, which was laying on its side. And we had seen it the previous winter in the snow. This is a fire tube boiler. The fire in the firebox goes through the tube, heats the water up to pressure, and then up the stack goes the smoke.
So everything from here all the way to the stack in the front is the boiler.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what you dragged out of the woods first.
Yes, that was the first major piece that we had to have if we were going to have a steam Lombard operation. And to get to that point, we had made many phone calls. David Clark, Donnie Johnson, Edward Clark, and Tommy Clark did a lot of searching around, a lot of false leads to finally end up with enough pieces to put a machine together.
So you got the boiler, the cylinders, and the differential, and all these gears and whatnot. And what about these sections, the tracks?
The pads came from many places where we were told Lombards had been cut up.
But you were actually digging around in the mud trying to find these pieces.
Yes, yes. They weigh just about 50 pounds apiece. A lot of times the junkies left them because they had manganese in them and their big magnets wouldn't pick them up.
One blast is to stop, 2 is to go forward, and 3 blast means go backward. And I'm going to say to the steersman, give us the forward signal, steersman. There you have his signal, and then the second whistle to the rear is belonging to the engineer, and he will signal that he understands that to go forward, which is 2 blasts. Mr. Engineer, will you now give your signal? All right, that means it's acknowledged. Now, if the steersman didn't get what he wanted, he'd better start to blow his whistle real soon. These men cannot yell back and forth to each other while they're hauling out them logs. The rear whistle is a very unique one. It's known as a mockingbird whistle. It has 2 chords on it. It is worth your hearing it. They are a rarity. It is on here much as a novelty than anything else. Mr. Engineer, would you do that again, Mr. Engineer? Well, there you are. You have it. He changed the length of the resonance chamber with the 2nd chord. And some of those mockingbird whistles can almost speak English. I guess that's enough on the whistles. I said I would take the time.
We flew Hal's ears off.
The Lombard Log Hauler, like the electric bulb, the telegraph, and the invention of the steam engine itself, is a classic example of modern inventiveness. The application of one man's logic to an incredibly practical problem.
If you look at this log hauler, as you may, you can see a terrific pride and dignity. There is no detail on here but what it was an essential detail. It had to be. There was nothing done to try to make the log hauler or the locomotive look pretty. Everything is absolutely functional. I only wish that you've had the opportunities that I've had in life, because I do feel them, I know them, I know why the smoke box is here. I can see the proud smokestack, and particularly when such machines as this are doing their work, you hear their personality. We call it stack music in the trade. The harder the load is that she is pulling, the more invigorating this machine becomes. The exhaust from the cylinders go into the nozzle, which is directly below the smokestack. And each exhaust blast goes up there, creating a vacuum on the firebox and the boiler, infuriating the fire, so that the harder the work is and the harder the load is, the harder the fire burns, and the more steam is produced. But there's something more to tell you about steam. It preceded the internal combustion engine, and steam locomotives, steam log haulers, are very human. If you have the right blood in your veins to recognize it, there's a personality to these machines, especially when they're under steam. A real steam man can feel the life that there is there. He can hear the little sounds and the little trickles and the parts to them. They are truly an air-breathing device, and they've got a personality.
Remember back when we were kids, we'd come here every day. We watched the trains go by and dream of places far away.
Sometimes we would sit for hours, lost inside that dream, till we heard those engines coming, belching smoke and steam.
Overlooked, as so often the greatest ideas have been. Unacknowledged, as so much individual effort often is, but undoubtedly a 20th century marvel to behold. Beautiful, even magnificent.
Catch the last train running, can't you hear that whistle blow? Catch the last train running, this is your last chance to go.
Without people like the resourceful Clark family in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, another piece of shamefully recent history would be forgotten, like the antiquities of the past.